Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie from Story a Day here. This week, I want to talk to you about a metaphor for the writing life that I've been obsessed with this week. It started with my friend Kathy Hay, who is a seamstress, sewer, sewist, historical costumer, corset maker, YouTuber. Anyway, she sews and she makes wonderful clothing, and she runs a community of other sewists, I think they call themselves these days. And she was talking one day about the creative life and creation of anything. And she was talking about how it's success and progress is never a straight line. And she didn't mention the squiggly diagram you often see for, success and progress that doubles back on itself, and it's just like somebody threw a bunch of thread on the ground and it's just this big knot. She talked about our path, our creative path, being like an upward spiral, and it's opening out and it's widening, and we're learning more and we're getting better all the time. And I started thinking about that, and I remembered stories that my dad told me about when he was a teenager and joined the Royal Air Force's Air Training Corps. And, it was not that long after World War II, maybe a decade and a half after the war had ended. And so patriotism, was part of it. The 60s were the 50s and 60s were a volatile time, and one assumed that there was going to be another war anytime soon, and you were going to get called up. So sure, patriotism was part of it. But I think part of the appeal was really that they were going to let him fly gliders. And so that idea was fascinating to me as a kid. Like, how do you fly a plane that has no engine? What's that about? And he told me about this thing that Kathy was talking about, this idea of this upward spiral. And in the case of flight, it's a thermal. And we would watch birds circling and gliding in the air, and he would point it out, and they found a thermal. And this seemed amazing to me. So I started looking at what that actually is, and I came across this diagram which I've recreated for you at Story a Day blog, and the link's in the show notes, of how glider pilots and probably birds find thermals. I think the glider pilots are maybe a little more rational and thought-based about it, and the birds are going on instinct. But whichever way you write, whether you plan or whether you're purely instinctive, it's worth noticing patterns. So a glider pilot notices the pattern that over areas like farms, there is an updraft of warm air. And if they get their glider onto that thermal, they can be boosted, because essentially in a glider you're falling, right? You're falling, you're being pulled down to earth, and your job is to try and avoid falling for as long as possible. So these updrafts of hot air, these thermals, they're over farms, and so you find farmland and you coast up, and then you can coast for a while. But if you find yourself over something like a wetland's pulling all the energy down, and so your glider is going to fall even faster than normal. So then you might want to look for something else that's going to give you a boost, some other likely source of an updraft, like a town. Lots of heat coming off a town, all of that concrete, all of that tarmac, all of those houses and buildings pumping out heat. So maybe you catch a thermal near a town, and it takes you and lets you soar and lets you glide to the next place that you find a thermal. So why am I talking about this to you, a writer? Because as writers, we are fighting against normality. We are fighting against a culture, especially if you live in the US, or one of the more industrialized countries that has forgotten to value creativity as much as our ancestors maybe did. And I think I've seen this in my lifetime get worse. So if you're in one of those cultures that is telling you that all work is good and that you need to be hustling all the time and you need to be thinking about where your next penny's coming from and you need to be, it's virtuous to be productive all the time, we can tend to devalue creativity and play. And I think we need to keep a playful attitude in order to be able to be creative. And so I think we are bucking the trend by carving out time to do things that aren't volunteering for a local service organisation, cleaning the house, looking after our families, doing our jobs, answering email at 10 o'clock at night before we go to bed. All of these things that the larger culture pushes as virtues, may well be virtues, but if you want to carve out time for creative play, in order to be truly creative and write great stuff, you have to be willing to be a bit of a rebel. You have to fight against that sense that you ought to be doing this or you ought to be doing the other thing. Sometimes it's useful to hang out with other writers to get that first lift. When a glider takes off, it doesn't get up there by itself. It has someone tow it. There is a plane with an engine that tows it up there and lets it go. So sometimes we need an artificial boost, and we go to conferences and we take classes, we have a writers group, and we borrow that energy. And maybe your writers group meets once a month, or you go to a conference once a year, and that's a really good start. You come back full of excitement and energy, but you start to get pulled down almost immediately when you get back into your everyday life. So how do you find those thermals, those creative thermals that will lift you every now and then? I don't know about you, but I do better when I look outside myself for stuff like that. So I may hang out with other people who are pursuing creativity. It's just like with, my husband jokes that we should invite somebody over to our house every week because it always looks so nice when we do. And we just don't do that level of cleanup for ourselves every week. So this is the same thing with getting a little creative push. You might need to borrow it from someone else. So in between those big launch moments where you're being launched into the air and you're full of excitement, maybe you do go to your writers group. Maybe subscribe to a newsletter. Maybe you listen to this podcast every week and it gives you a little boost. Maybe you sign up for the Story a Week newsletter, which sends you a writing prompt every week. Yesterday in fact, I was sitting at my desk writing the scene that I was talking about a couple of weeks ago that I was stuck on, and finally I've broken it down enough that I know where I have to go and I know what I have to do, and it is multiple scenes. So I wrote a couple of them and I got into the next scene and I knew that I had to have my hero do something stupid and flawed, and I knew that, but I didn't know what it looked like. And I had written a whole bunch and I was sitting there staring at my screen, and I realized I am not going to figure this out sitting here staring at my screen. I need to take a walk. So sometimes the creative lift, that creative thermal, can come from moving your body. Sometimes it can come from putting on inspiring music you love, music that you're embarrassed to play in front of anybody else because they would laugh at you for liking it. Watching a movie, it could be like I did, going for a walk, moving your body. Reading something trashy or brilliant. It might be gardening, something that takes you away from the gravity of all the things that the world tells you ought to be doing. Something that gives you a little lift and lets you soar for a while. I would love it if you come over to the blog and leave a comment on my article about what I'm calling the lesson in creative thermodynamics. I would love it if you would leave a comment there and let me know what it is that lifts you. And it may be more than one thing. It may be a particular song, it may be moving, it may be hanging out with a friend, it may be calling your mother, it may, whatever it is. I think if we can get a little bank of comments there that everybody else can read through, it will really help everyone to think about and to see that they're not the only one who's taking time out from the chores to do the thing that matters to them, to do the thing which actually powers them. I think in our lives, to extend the metaphor, I think in every aspect of our lives, our creativity is the thermal that lifts us as people up, makes us better, lifts us higher, allows us to soar in order to get through all those other necessary things we have to do. We have to clean the bathroom and visit people and do good works and earn a crust. And those things have different levels of how much they fulfill us. But sometimes they're the wetland, they're absorbing energy, they are sucking energy out of us. Our creativity and our writing lifts us. So find the things in your life that boost you and let you soar and be creative, because that lets you soar and be creative in the rest of your life. It recharges you, it gives you lift. Come on over to the blog and leave a comment. Tell me what gives you lift. And most of all, keep writing.
If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the Story a Day 3-day challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days. And it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-day challenge at storyaday.org/3DC. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.